Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. We're really excited here at OCCRP to host these webinars. We're really glad for your interest. My name is Ilya Lazovsky. I am a staff writer and senior editor here at OCCRP. I work largely on Central Asia and the Caucasus, but also have done a lot of work on Ukraine and on Russia. And since we are a network here at OCCRP, we have a lot of great partners and member centers all over the world that we're fortunate to work with. And I think we're super lucky, especially in Russia, as far as Russia is concerned, to have important stories, важные истории, and the editor-in-chief, Roman Anin, who you're all here to hear from today. So I'll just be moderating and hosting, and we'll start with a little bit of just housekeeping. I'm just going to do a quick intro, and then Roman and I will talk for about half an hour about some sort of basic topics about what it's like for him to be doing this critical work right now in this very strange time. And then at the end of that discussion, we will take questions from you, the audience. So please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen to submit questions. And then we will relay those on to Roman, and we will do as many as we have time for in the session that we have today. So we'll begin right now. Roman probably needs no introduction for many of you, but just in case, he is one of Russia's most experienced and probably best known investigative journalists, originally starting as a sports journalist working for Novaya Gazeta for many years, and then transitioning into investigative reporting many years ago. And Roman is best known probably for his work on corruption, including the Panama Papers, which we're all probably familiar with, and the Paradise Papers. And over the years, he's done many really phenomenal stories for Novaya Gazeta, for us here at OCCRP, and of course now for Important Stories. Some of my favorite ones, I will list a few, and then we'll drop links later so you can see some of his great work from the past. Great one is called Love, Offshores and Administrative Resources. This is about how Kirill Shamalov, who married Vladimir Putin's youngest daughter, gained access to enormous wealth of financial opportunities. So that story really shows off how administrative resources work in Russia once you have a connection to Putin's family. And that one uses a really interesting leaked archive of emails, among other sources, to show how that works. And then I remember a great story, which also shows how well-sourced Roman is, called The Brotherhood of Killers and Cops, which was a story from a few years ago that really showcases the symbiotic relationship between Russian law enforcement and the criminal underworld. And I just don't know of anyone else who could have done that story, because Roman's sources are really fantastic. And when you read that story, you'll see also a little bit into those sources and how Roman interacted with them. And then another great story he did was about Putin's bodyguards and how they were rewarded with land and power and money, and at whose expense that land and power and money came. And I think that is something that always is noticeable in Roman's reporting. It's not just about, who got the money, who got the offshore company. It's not all about oligarchs and officials. It's also about the ordinary Russian people who are affected by the corrupt structures that exist in Russia today, and how they really suffer at the hands of official Russia. And that's why one reason why this reporting is so important. Another story I'll mention is The Secret of the Saint Princess Olga. That is a story where Roman managed to connect to find a yacht that belonged to Sechin, one of the most powerful men in Russia and one of Vladimir Putin's closest people. And that story led to some persecution later, which maybe we will have time to talk about later. So that's just a few examples of the many stories Roman has done over the years. And for this reporting, he has been awarded many prestigious prizes, many Russian prizes, the Knight Journalism Fellowship at Stanford University, the Knight Trailblazer Award, and the European Press Prize last year. Those are just a few of the awards. And of course, in Russia these days, another kind of award that you can get is recognition by the Russian state as a foreign agent or as undesirable person or organization. And Roman, of course, this is a sign that official Russia, the Russian government, doesn't care about you if you're reporting about ordinary people. What they care about is going after you if you're exposing officials or oligarchs. And so this is really a mark of honor and a mark of distinction today. And I think it really showcases the impact that Roman has had. So without further ado, I think that's enough of an intro. We'll get right into the discussion. And I guess let's start with that question of persecution. I think we're all pretty familiar with the fact that independent journalism has been squeezed in Russia like never before in recent times, leaving very little left on the ground in the country. But Roman, maybe you could start and maybe tell us a little bit about how that crackdown worked in your case, and use that to maybe tell us a little bit about what the atmosphere has been like in recent years.
Hi, everybody, and thank you for this introduction, which I definitely don't deserve, but thank you. Yeah, unfortunately, these days I'm not in Russia, as the rest of my team, and we had kind of our story is similar to the stories of other journalists who had to leave Russia after Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine, with maybe one little but very important detail, because we were preparing ourselves to relocation a long time before we had actually to relocate the newsroom. So I left Russia May last year, in a month and a half after FSB, which is the main secret service in Russia, conducted a search in my apartment and in the office of IStories on a ridiculous criminal case. They are still accusing me of interference in the private life of Olga Sechenna, ex-wife of Igor Sechin, because of the story of the yacht. Technically I'm not a suspect in the case, I'm still a witness, but the case is still being investigated. And I mean, the case is ridiculous because, the law says that you can't, there is no crime if you use something that was published by a person. It can't be a matter of the private life, let alone if it's in the public interest. And of course, in my case, I used photos that were published by her, and it was in the matter of public interest. Anyways, I had to leave Russia May last year, and it was a very difficult decision to make, to be honest, because I left for vacations and I was planning to come back in July. But a number of sources, everybody here whom I called, told me that there is a big chance that I would be arrested on the border when I returned to Russia, and I decided not to go back. It was difficult because, well, first of all, it was difficult to be outside of Russia while the rest of your team was there, and guys were risking their freedom and their lives in some cases, reporting about corruption and organized crime in Russia. The second reason why it was difficult is because I have always believed that you gotta live in the country you write about, because otherwise you lose the connection with the country, you lose what we call the nerve of the country. And I was really, and I'm still afraid that it's something that can happen to me and to the rest of the team. Today, I think I made the right decision, because when the war started, we, as all Russian journalists, had this choice between three options: either stay in Russia and stop reporting, just shut up and everything will be okay, or stay in Russia, continue reporting and go to jail, which also means that at one point you would have to stop working because it's impossible to write any stories from jail, or leave Russia and continue your work from exile. We decided that this is we made this choice. I wouldn't say it's the best choice, and we are really happy that we made it. I mean, I would say it's not an easy choice, because again, people left their families. I will never forget how, when the war started, just the very same day, I rented a big minivan. I went to Latvia, to the border with Russia. I drove like 24 hours. Then I had to wait for 9 hours for my colleagues when they were passing the border with their dogs, with their big suitcases. It was cold and there was no any connection. I didn't know what was going on with them, and it was already the time when the Russian state imposed these laws that forbid you call the war, which we of course did. We decided that we will not follow the censorship rules and we'll continue reporting. So any of them could have been arrested on the border and sentenced to 10 years of prison for calling the war a war. But I mean, today I think that we made a right decision, because from Exile we were able to publish a number of very important stories about the war. Because when the war started, I asked myself, what can we as Russian reporters do? What is our mission? And I thought that maybe the best thing we can do is actually try to bring justice to the victims and try to identify concrete war criminals who committed concrete war crimes. And that's what we started doing. So as of today, we've published news and bigger stories that identify, on this stage, more than 15, but this week we're going to publish another report that will identify another 5 or 7 soldiers, Russian soldiers, who committed serious crimes like rapes and assassinations and executions of civilians. And of course, if we had stayed in Russia, we wouldn't have been able to publish these stories. And I'm very happy that we are doing this work.
And I just jump in with a quick question. Do you think that this sense of mission that you're feeling, your mission, at least now, is to cover what Russia is doing in Ukraine? Is this shared among many of your colleagues from other Russian outlets, many others who have had to flee Russia? Is this something that you find, yourself discussing with other Russian journalists or hearing from them?
To be honest, no, I don't see that. I mean, if you take the Russian media, we're probably, of course, Ukrainian media are doing a lot of work like we do. But if you take Russian media, I think we are, I don't want to, exaggerate, but I read everybody, and I think that we are the best in this sphere in terms of identifying concrete names. In some cases, we even corrected Ukrainian officials. There was a very interesting case when a Russian soldier forgot a Polaroid. He didn't forget it, actually. I think he made it purposely. He left a Polaroid photo in the apartment of a civilian in the Kyiv region, which he stole a lot of things from the apartment. And Ukrainian officials claimed that they had identified the guy, but in the end they identified the wrong person. And we actually, we showed them the proof that this was the wrong person, and the guy they identified, was not in the army anymore. So we identified the right person. So this is one kind of thing that we do. The other the other sphere that we focus on is writing about hidden assets of Russian oligarchs and officials in the West, so that they are arrested. And 4 big cases of sanctions and arrests were based on our stories. This is the Sechen's yacht. This is the villa that belongs to Rothenberg in France. These are properties of member of the Russian Security Council Komarov in London, and also sanctions against the daughter-in-law of Lavrov. It's also comes from our story about Lavrov's mistress, Miss Polikova. So I think it's a really important work that we did. Of course, Russian authorities, they know who is dangerous, and that is why we, until recently, were the only media that was simultaneously a foreign agent and undesirable organization. Like a couple of days ago, they also proclaimed undesirable insider. So an insider is the second media that is both a foreign agent and undesirable. Being undesirable is actually, I would say it means nothing for us, but I don't want to lie. Being undesirable actually shows what are the real values of the Russian independent media, to be honest. Because when we were proclaimed undesirable, according to the law, everybody who cooperates with an undesirable organization can be sentenced to 4 years of prison, and the director of undesirable organization can be sentenced to 6 years of prison. But we decided not to shut down IStories. We decided not to stop our operations, and the majority of my reporters are reporting under their names. Like, they're not hiding that they cooperate for IStories, so they don't hide that they actually violate the law, and they're not afraid of these sentences of the potential punishment, even despite the fact that all of our families are still in Russia. And we know, for instance, from my criminal case, that law enforcement and secret services are following relatives. I mean, in the docs from my criminal case, I saw that they actually wanted to conduct a search in the apartment of my parents. I don't know why they didn't do that, but the apartment was there, and it was in the list, and they were discussing it in the internal documents. But what we see, but I mean, yeah, what also means being undesirable is that everybody who actually quotes us can be fined and then sentenced to 4 years of prison if the crime is committed a second time. So that is why, we had to cut off all the donations from the readers, and we were doing quite okay in terms of donations. We, raised really great amounts. Now we don't have this opportunity. But what is also interesting that some Russian independent media actually decided not to quote us because of risks. So, which means that this, this idea behind the law, which was adopted by the Kremlin, make these people undesirable in the literal sense, not like, in the legal, it's actually working. Because, when we ask our colleagues from the independent media, even those who also relocated the newsrooms, like, guys, why don't you quote us? They say, well, because you're undesirable. This is a big risk for us.
So that means you could come out with a huge investigation tomorrow, and they won't tell their own readers about it. They won't re-report it.
Yeah, I mean, we saw it in some cases. In other cases, what we see is that they don't quote us, even if we say we write a story, but then somebody, some other media outlets, say from Ukraine, quote us. Then what the Russian media does, they quote Ukrainian media, like saying like, the media from Ukraine, is quoting IStories, saying that IStories wrote blah blah blah, because they don't want to quote the direct source in order to, to minimize the risks. I mean, to be honest, I don't like it. Yes, I do understand, the risks, but these risks are nothing in comparison with what kind of risks, journalists and plain people in Ukraine have because of the Russian invasion. Especially since everybody left Russia. I do understand people who are still in Russia, and yes, this is a big risk. You got to make a big decision whether you want to be arrested tomorrow, right? So it's difficult. I mean, since I'm abroad, it means that I didn't make this decision. I couldn't make the decision like I want to go to jail. No, so I do understand it. But for the media that is abroad, and today all the independent Russian media is abroad, I don't understand it, to be honest.
What about the other side of the equation? When you're talking to your sources, or when you want to interview somebody, quote somebody for a story, does that present a risk for them to appear in your story? And how do you deal with that challenge?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of experts who also left Russia, and they say that, we don't care. We'll talk to you. There are some, but I mean, in many cases, experts, both from Russia and from outside said no, because you're undesirable and you are great guys, we respect you, but sorry, we will not talk to you because you're undesirable. But actually, being undesirable, I lost many sources, not because of, the media outlet is proclaimed undesirable, but because of war. We are really straightforward in the way we call it. We see that, I say personally that, Putin is the head of the fascist regime, and what the Russian army is doing, they behave themselves as fascists during the Second World War, and they're committing huge crimes, both, I mean, against Ukraine, but also against their own country, because, they're destroying their own country. And of course, sources that I had in the secret services and law enforcement, many of them support the war. And that's why I, for instance, lost many sources after the start of the war. But I mean, on the other hand, I see it as a good thing as well, because now I understand what was the mentality of these people, and I don't want to deal with people who support such horrible crimes that the Russian army is committing in Ukraine.
Have you noticed any change over the course of the war? Because I've heard other places that initially there was more kind of skepticism and doubt and fear about the war, but then as time goes on, things kind of are feeling normalized in Russia. So I don't know if this could be about sources, about experts, about friends, family, anybody. Are you noticing a change over the last few months?
Absolutely. People are getting used to the war. And what is really interesting is that people don't understand the consequences. People don't understand what's going to happen to Russia in half a year, in 5 years, in 10 years. Just people, it looks like, people forbid themselves to think, because if you start thinking, then you will definitely realize that what kind of tragedy has happened. And, there is no any good solution. There is no any good outcome. There is nothing, even if Russia, say, wins the war and they enter Kyiv, still in 5, 10, 15 years, it will lead to a tragedy inside Russia itself. So yeah, people got used to the war, and people just try not to think about it at all, because they do understand that the consequences are very hard.
And about your reporting, do you still see your audience as the same as it was before? Your audience is in Russia. Is your audience more? Do you feel like you're speaking to Russia? Do you feel like you're speaking to the outside world, or maybe both? Can you talk about how you're reaching people?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I mean, since we are blocked, our audience is growing significantly as of every Russian independent media. In some platforms, we've doubled our audience, in some platforms tripled. So we see that more and more people kind of reading us. Of course, we see that, I mean, it's difficult to understand these days how many people are reading us from inside Russia, from outside Russia, because many people are using VPNs. That is why YouTube is a very good platform, because it's still not blocked. And this is where you can see that where people come from. And we do a lot for YouTube because, again, I mean, it's a great platform. It's not blocked. And yeah, we see that some of our videos, are watched by hundreds of thousands of people, and the majority is from regions. So, for instance, just recently we published a story that already got more than 250,000 views, which is not bad. And only 15% of these people were from Moscow and St. Petersburg. The majority are from regions. And all kind of regions, from Vladivostok to Kaliningrad. This is a great sign that, people from all over Russia watch us and read us. And we know the average age of the audience. So we are the media of the young Russians. Our major audience is grouped from 18 to 24. And then the second from 24 to 35, if I'm not mistaken. Which is kind of logical because, the scientific data shows that once a person is indoctrinated by propaganda, there is nothing you can do with it. I mean, you can't persuade anybody. I recently talked to one of the most well-known neuroscientists in the world, Robert Sapolsky, and asked him, what we as journalists can do to change the mind of people who believe in this bullshit that is distributed by propaganda. And he said, unfortunately, nothing. I mean, once people are infected, there is no way to change it. Even if you present them facts that show that, what they believe in is not true, it actually has a reverse effect. So people start believing in propaganda even more. So that is why we realized that we gotta talk to the young audience, because scientists call it as a vaccination of truth. So once people are vaccinated, if you tell them the facts before they listen to propaganda, then they're less likely to believe propaganda. So we think that the only way to young Russians, those young people who will live and who will decide the future of the country in 10 years, is our core audience, and they're the last hope, I would say.
That's what I keep telling myself too. You can reach the young people, but then I start asking myself, well, we have a whole generation that has grown up after the Soviet Union. They never knew the Soviet Union. They actually, in the 90s, it was a pretty free media environment compared to today, but still very large majorities, seem to be following the official line. So it's like, what happened to those people? I mean, I don't have an answer. I don't know if there is an answer we can think of now, but it
You're
is.
right. You're right. But the thing is that not so many people. I mean, even those generations that were not raised in the Soviet Union. Well, first of all, uh, even if the Soviet Union collapsed in 91, right, it doesn't mean that it stopped existing, because still the educational system was the same in both the schools, universities. All our teachers, all our parents, all our, the army was the same. So I would say that the Soviet mentality hasn't disappeared. Yes, the Soviet Union did, but the mentality did not. And I see myself, I was born in 86, but still, I remember the school. I remember, my friends. We all were kind of influenced by the Soviet mentality, because it was everywhere. This is one possible explanation. The other possible explanation is that, and I think it's the main one, is that people were not really that much interested in the independent media, especially in the 90s and beginning of 2000s in Russia, because media is actually a necessity in democracy, but it's a luxurious necessity, because you don't read the news when you don't have enough money to buy food, right? You don't think about the news. You think about how to feed your family, and that's what happens to the majority of Russians. That is why Putin is so interested in keeping his population poor, because they don't have time and opportunity to think about and to read, think about what's going on and to read the independent media. They are just interested in surviving. People are surviving.
What do you think about the criticism I've seen voiced that the sort of liberal, opposition media didn't make enough of an effort to reach wide audiences? Sounds like a bunch of intellectuals who are talking to themselves or to their small circles in Moscow, maybe in St. Petersburg, but that there should have been, maybe it's too late now, but at some point there should have been a bigger effort to sort of have tabloids, popular media that would present an alternative point of view, and maybe that's a missed opportunity. What do you think of that?
Well, maybe, but I mean, if you ask me whether I want to, start a tabloid and become popular, I would say no, because ethics and standards are important for me. And Russian independent media was actually doing quite well in terms of following this ethical standards that they actually copied from the West. And at some point, I think that if you take the mid 2000s, when I started working with OCCRP and ICIJ, I had this chance to kind of compare media outlets, in Russia and in other parts of the world. And I saw that actually in Russia, the School of Investigative Reporting was, in many cases, was even better than in newspapers like New York Times or the Guardians. I remember when we were working on Panama Papers, we had a meeting in London where there were like a bunch of really serious media outlets present, like the biggest, the best media you can imagine. And we were talking about a very simple thing, how you can get data about the Cyprus company that owns a subsidiary in Russia. And I said, guys, why do we discuss it in general? It's really simple. You just go online and buy the records for 10 euros. And people in those, best international media, they didn't know that everything is open, that you can get an annual report, of a Cyprus company online, while everybody in Russia was using it and while everybody was doing it. So I wouldn't say that, the Russian independent media was that bad that it didn't try to reach the audience. Novaya Gazeta was publishing so many reports from the regions, we had like numerous, endless business trips to all sorts of regions, and we reported from them. But even Novaya Gazeta didn't become the most popular newspaper in Russia.
So before we switch to other people's questions, I just wanted to return a little bit, say a little more about this question of the quality of coverage of Russia and the Ukraine war from the outside. Can you say anything about, what do you think of Western coverage of Russia and of the war, and what do you think are the biggest weaknesses, and what could be done better?
I think the biggest weakness is that it's not only about the media, it's also about the people who make decisions. I think on this stage, it's absolutely obvious that people in the West did not understand, in some cases, do not understand, even on this stage, who is Putin in reality. When I met, numerous officials in the West, I tried to explain to them that, guys, you're dealing with one of the worst criminals you can imagine, because this is a mixture of an organized crime guy with a guy from secret services, actually, who had a very bad career in secret services. He didn't achieve any great results, and a simultaneously corrupt official. So this is the guy without morale. When you try to when you deal with him, you got to understand that there is nothing, there are no any values, like common values that we share, that you can't kill, that you can't betray, that you can't do all sorts of bad things. There are no such values over there, and that is why you got to understand that this is, this is a beast, and people didn't understand that. They thought that they are dealing with a politician, yes, a corrupt politician, a strong leader. It's not about him. Unfortunately, what we see in Russia is the rule of the worst power you can imagine. Like people like Patrushev, like Putin, like Bortnikov, they are old Chekists that lost the Cold War, and they lived their life with this idea of revenge to the West, and they don't care about the means. If they need to kill 1 million people in Ukraine, they will kill without any doubts, and it's like nothing for them. And that's what I think, the media and the officials didn't understand before the start of the war. Now they see the consequences.
So you're not one of those people who thinks that Putin changed over the course of his rule. You think he was
No. I think that he has always been this type of person. It's actually vice versa. I'm saying that I know that many experts, they're trying to present like different stages of Putin, that in the beginning he used to be an ally of the West and he wanted to join NATO. I think it's bullshit, to be honest, because he was just kind of testing as an old operative of KGB. He was testing the reaction, and all his public statements in the beginning of 2000s that I want to join NATO were not true. You got to look at his statements, for instance, after the tragedy in Beslan. It was 2004. I would say it was the beginning of his reign, and a leader after such a horrible tragedy, when more than 300 children died, and actually they died because of your secret services, that they were not that professional to actually they were not that professional to prevent the tragedy. You can say anything you want, but what he said in 2004 was that the terrorists were kind of puppets of the West that was pulling the strings. So the guy from the early beginning was the same.
So the signals were already there for anyone.
The signals were already there. I think what really made him actually to make this, it's a long story actually. There are many reasons that persuaded him to start the war, and maybe it's a different topic, so let's not start it.
Oh, I think if you could give a really quick, I think there's sort of a debate in the West, is it really about NATO? And I think there are a lot of people in the West who are saying, well, NATO is at fault. Let's not get too much into geopolitics, but I guess it sounds like what you're saying is that his hostility to NATO is not something, it's not that he was disappointed by NATO eventually. It's that he considered it to be an enemy from the beginning.
Yeah, of course. And he doesn't lie when he says that NATO is approaching Russia, and he sees it as a threat to his existence. Right? He's not lying. The problem is that whether his analysis is based on real facts or on just his on his worst dreams from the KGB past. But the reason why he made such a decision, if you look at the history of his wars, all of them were successful. and nothing, happened to him. I mean, in 2008, he invaded Georgia, and it was a successful war. He occupied 20% of the country. And what was the reaction of the West? Nothing. In Crimea, they did everything in a couple of days without even shooting. So in Syria, it was more or less okay as well. It was more difficult than in Crimea, but still, it was more or less okay. And actually, they were very happy about the operation because they had this opportunity to test a number of weapons. So if you look at the guy, every war that he started was okay. It was a success. And on the eve of the war with Ukraine, because all his people from FSB were telling him that Ukrainians are waiting for us with flowers and candies, and we'll conquer Kyiv in 3 days. So imagine a dictator who doesn't care about lives, who has always been successful in all his wars and nothing happened to him, and he's getting intelligence that is telling him that everything will be okay. Of course, he would start a war.
Okay. Yeah, we could talk about this forever, but I just want to make sure we get to some questions. Here we have an anonymous question. Do you have any friends that work for state media? Do you think they believe what they're saying, or do they acknowledge that at least there's some bias, or how do they explain it to themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I do have friends who used to work for the state media. I do have not friends, but people who are still working for the state media. I would call them sources, not friends. None of them believe in the bullshit they tell the audience. But why do they do that? Because they have mortgage, because they have kids, because there is no other work. I mean, if you work for a state TV channel, there is no other job opportunity for you in Russia. You either have to change your profession, or you stay and you continue telling what you tell. That is why everybody's trying to avoid any responsibility. Nobody is willing to work on camera, except those notorious propagandists that we all know about, like Solovyov, Kisilov, and so on and so forth. These guys have nothing to lose, and that is why they're constantly.
And do they believe what they're saying?
It's an interesting question, actually. I don't think that Solovyov believes in what he said, because he's a smart guy, and he was really integrated in the West with his villas, with his residence permit in Italy, with his business in States. But at one point he made his choice, and now he understands that the only way for him to survive is actually is to be necessary for the power. That is why he's doing everything he is asked to do. Because if at one point he becomes useless, they will just get rid of him. So I think that yes, he understands that everything that is going on, and most likely he doesn't even believe in. But I mean, it's interesting about psychology, because even if you don't believe, but if you day by day, and he spends like hours online, he's constantly talking. If you look at YouTube, not YouTube, he's blocked there, but TV and the platform that they created, he's constantly on air. And of course, if you persuade yourself every day that you made the right choice, in the end, you will believe in it.
Becomes good for your own psychology to convince yourself, I guess.
Exactly.
Okay, here's another question, also anonymous. When you work with Ukrainian journalists, is there a tension between you and Ukrainian journalists, or in general between Russian and Ukrainian, independent, not talking about the propagandist, is there tension between independent Russian journalists and Ukrainian journalists?
We don't have any problems, because we don't even have problems with plain people and officials. They talk to us, because they see what we publish, they see how we call this war. I know that some other Russian journalists, they had problems, and they are still having problems with Ukrainian colleagues, but this is their fault, not the fault of, I believe so, because in the way, I mean, even before the start of the war, I think that many journalists as well had this mentality of an empire, that they still treated Ukraine as like, you are our junior brother, which is, of course, I mean, if you say things like that, nobody will respect you. No, we don't have any problems. Our reporter just recently got back from Kyiv region. She gathered amazing data about new war crimes that had not been reported before, and everybody was talking to her, and everybody was willing to talk. No, we don't have problems.
Okay, another anonymous question. What do you think about the focus on Russian oligarchs in the West? Do you think this is an effective strategy to have some effect on the war? Do you think it's an overemphasis? And I guess, do you think there's anything else that you think Western officials, leaders, people should be paying attention to?
Good and complicated question. I saw personal sanctions. I mean, it depends on how you actually treat personal sanctions. So if you treat them as a punishment, then okay. If you treat them as a tool, then of course they don't work. After 2014, when all Putin's inner circle became sanctioned, I mean, if the goal was to kind of divide the inner circle, then it didn't work, because what happened was vice versa. It has become more tight, because of course these guys, they can't leave Russia anymore. They're sanctioned, they can't fly anywhere, all their assets are blocked. So they do understand that they have, even if they don't like what Putin does, they have to be on board with him, because all other options are actually cut off. Simultaneously, some choices are really weird if you look at sanctions and at personal sanctions. Recently I was approached by a number of journalists who actually asked me about, I don't know, a Russian businessman, and whether he's, I think I can even call him Alexander Lebedev. He used to be shareholder of Nova Gazeta, and he actually, Secret Services ruined his business because he supported Nova Gazeta, and Putin hates him for the story that was published in his newspaper about Kabaeva. Anyways, and journalists asked me, and he got sanctioned by Canada, and journalists asked me a question about his connection to Drangheta and Cosa Nostra. I was like, guys, it's crazy. I mean, don't think that every oligarch who owns more than $1 million is actually connected to Putin. It's stupid, and it's just not true.
Okay. From Bob Otto, we have a congratulations on your story about Sergei Korolev. That's the first deputy head of the FSB, right? Who was linked to organized crime, just as a summary. And a question about whether you will be writing any more, or whether you have anything on him in the works.
Maybe. Never talk about future stories.
That's probably as good as you're going to get, Bob. Here is a question from Carl Lauer. What do you think we talked a little bit about this. What is the best way to inform Russians about what Russia is doing in Ukraine?
I think YouTube. If I had more resources, if I had more money, if I had more people, I would invest in YouTube. It's still not blocked, and even it's interesting. Look, Kremlin hasn't blocked it yet.
I was just going to ask why. That's surprising, maybe.
Because it's so popular. I mean, if you look at the YouTube, of course, the most popular shows are not political. They are, for kids. Every Russian mom, she and her kids, they are watching YouTube. And that is why Kremlin made some polls, some secret polls, when they try to analyze whether it's a good step to shut down YouTube. And in the end, they haven't done it because they realized that it's so popular. And I would invest in YouTube. Unfortunately, I don't have that much resources. Relocation actually increased our budget by 45%. And now it's one part of the problem, but the other part of the problem is that talking about stupid sanctions, all the platforms, Meta, Google, meaning YouTube, Instagram, they actually don't allow Russian media promote their stories for the Russian audience, which is so stupid, because if you look at what the Kremlin does, they invest billions of dollars in propaganda inside Russia. They spread their news and stories everywhere. And we can't even invest $100 in our YouTube to promote our story. So all the number of subscribers that you see on our channel and all the number of views that you see on our channel is all organic. We can't pay a penny because it's forbidden by the platforms. And I was like, guys, really, you don't allow independent media promote their stories for the Russian audience? And this is how you want to fight propaganda? While these guys are investing billions of dollars, literally billions of dollars, in what they do. Of course, we will never win this war. I can't find, I don't know, 200,000 euros for 2 years to pay salaries to my reporters. And some people asking why, Russian independent media are not that effective. Well, because, these are just different. We're from the different lake. If you take the budget of RT and how many people work for them, and if you take iStories, or I don't know, or BBC, or not even BBC Russia, or Dost, it's like, you can't compare these things.
So speaking of that, here's a maybe anonymous question that's relevant. What can people in the West do to help Russian independent media outlets? How can they help you, in your situation where you're working outside of the country? Is it about donations?
Yeah, I would say two things. First of all, we need to persuade platforms play on our side. Let's come up with a list of trustworthy Russian media that follow the standards, and allow them promote their stories for the Russian audience. That would change a lot. Let's make platforms implement technical solutions that would allow Russian audience access the blocked websites. And it's not fantastic. The most popular browser in Russia is Google Chrome. Okay, so if Google implements some protocols inside Chrome, I don't want to go into technical details, but call it a VPN inside Chrome. It's not a VPN, but let's call it a VPN inside Chrome. That means that all the websites will become available in Russia. Have you heard anything from Google, about how they might change their technical or anything, in terms of coverage, media coverage in Russia? No, they don't think about it at all. Let's persuade YouTube, kind of let us promote our stories for the Russian audience. And of course, financing is important. If I had, the math is very simple. If I could hire 5 more people for my YouTube channel, I know that I would increase my audience, not even 5, but maybe 10 times. So that means that, more and more people will know the truth about the war, will get access to our investigations. And, maybe we'll kind of we'll start asking questions, what's going on, and we'll start asking questions about what authorities are doing. So the math is very, very simple here. So I would say, yes, donations and, talking to big tech platforms would be the best 2 things that you can do to help us.
It sounds like the single tightest bottleneck is about producing YouTube videos, basically. If you could pick one place to have more resources, it would be basically YouTube production.
Yeah, of course. But it's logical, because on this stage, it's not blocked. You got to choose something that is popular and that is not blocked. I'm not a video guy, I've always been writing, but I had to start doing a lot of videos. I always do videos like every week because, I know that people watch it. I know that this is the way to reach the audience. And I had to convert myself into a video guy. So yes, I would invest in YouTube while this opportunity still exists.
In terms of your reporting, has that changed? And is it, when you switching from being a text guy to a YouTube guy, is that only a change in the presentation, or does that also change how you do the reporting?
No, we have changed completely, because before the start of the war, we were an investigative media outlet. We published no more than 2 stories per week on our website. If you take YouTube, maximum once a month. When the war started, we realized that, look, guys, we don't have time and resources for long-term investigations that took us half a year. You mentioned the story, the Brotherhood of Killers of Cops, that I also love, and I think it's my best story. I worked for more than 2 years on this story. I don't have these resources, unfortunately, now. That is why we started doing many daily stories. When I say many, it's still way less than others do. We publish about 2-3 stories per day. Some of them are investigative, others are news, other reports. Some are, when we kind of use AI tools to identify soldiers. But no, we are completely different. And of course, because we became undesirable, I have to admit the quality of our stories, is worse, because we can't quote all the experts that we talk to. if you take our previous stories, all of them were really well structured. You had data analysis, half of our stuff, coders, including myself. So the story was well structured because we had data, we had experts, and now sometimes we quote an expert and we say we can't call the name of an expert because we're undesirable. Is it a good journalism? No, it's not. Do we have any other options? No, we don't.
Here's a related question. Has it been more difficult to reach high-level sources since the war started?
Yeah, but simultaneously, what we noticed that the number of leaks has increased. So we're getting more leaks because it's obvious that there are many people who are not happy with the war in the government, and they are sending us anonymous leaks. Yes, we all know how tricky anonymous leaks can be, but on the other hand, if they're important for the public, and if we can prove that they're genuine, then of course we take them and publish them. And I can say that really soon we'll publish a number of really big stories that will be based on leaks.
Great, so looking forward to that. Here's another anonymous question. What do you think Navalny's impact has been on investigative journalism in Russia? Do you consider him a colleague as a journalist or something else? And what do you think his relationship is to journalism?
Well, of course, he's not a journalist. I really respect what he did. I really respect his courage. We are acquainted. I think he's a great guy, very brave. In terms of journalism, well, no, of course, because he and his colleagues, they are amazing researchers. In terms of we share the tools, but not the way we present the results, right? Because our goals are different. So our goal is to inform people. Their goal is political. They don't hide it. They're quite honest, right? In how they present the stories. So, for instance, in my video program where I talk about the news, I can afford myself, call some politicians stupid and so on, because this is like an opinion, right? But in my investigations, I can't do that. I gotta be really, I gotta follow the standards, which they don't do, of course. They call everybody, I don't know, assassins, fraudsters, and so on and so forth. And of course, they never send requests. They never ask people to write about what they think about their findings. We don't do that. We still try to follow all the standards, even when it's really difficult. Because, for instance, say a reporter is working on a story, right? A reporter constantly requests and disclose his identity, because if he does it, then he would admit that he's working for an undesirable organization. So that is why we had to set up an anonymous email, and all the requests from IStories are signed by me, even when I don't work on the stories, so that, because I don't hide my identity, I openly say that I continue being editor of IStories.
Here's a question that came in anonymously. You have been talking a lot about YouTube, but what about Telegram? That's a major outlet and medium in Russia, right? Have you been trying to use that as well?
Yeah, of course, we use it a lot, and we're doing quite well over there. So every month, more than 1 million, in some months, 1.5 million of our posts are viewed by, reach the audience of more than 1.5 million, which is very good, because we're actually a very young media outlet. We're just 2 years old. It's like nothing, 2 years. We already have more than 45,000 subscribers in Telegram, and as I said, we reach the audience exceeds sometimes millions of viewers. The thing about Telegram is that it's different from YouTube. Telegram is more about news, while YouTube, you can publish documentaries there, you can publish your shows there, you can publish your investigations there. So it's a bit different. But I do agree that Telegram has become the main social platform for news during the war.
What about lawsuits? This is maybe something that more journalists in the West, dealing in the West, have to deal with, slaps, lawsuits meant to target journalists. Is that something that you're worried about, or that has an impact on your work or how you do your stories?
I was sued like a dozen of times probably, and I won the majority of them. I lost only 3 times to Sechin himself, and it's impossible to win Sechin in the Russian court, and to the guy who used to be the head of the presidential, not administration, it was called the Department of Presidential Affairs of Russia, because again, it was impossible. It's impossible to win such people in Russian courts. In other cases, when the plaintiffs were not so high level, I won all the cases. These days, we don't care about them because we don't think anybody will sue us, and the reality has changed completely. They would rather kill us than sue us these days. So we haven't seen any lawsuits in the last year, probably. I think the last lawsuit that we dealt with was about 1 year ago, and it was from Sechin.
And that was in Russia. Have you?
Yeah, that was from Rosneft. Sorry, not from Sechin. From
and you haven't had any lawsuits outside Russia, right? I don't think.
No.
Okay, that's something OCCRP has dealt with, in the UK with libel laws, but I guess you've had a different experience so far.
Yeah.
Knock on wood. Okay, almost coming to the end here. We have a question from Niels Hansen. What are some investigative methods and tools that every journalist should use when reporting on a country from abroad? This one could probably take 6 hours to answer, but maybe what are your top?
I mean, all of them are known. Use sources, use data that is use open sources, that are online. Unfortunately, in Russia, it's becoming more and more difficult. They recently closed the property register, so now you can't get records about the owner of a property. They are closing company records. I mean, you still can get records about companies, but those companies that are involved in military production, or that are being under sanctions, or that are controlled by Putin's cronies, they don't publish any annual reports, and they don't publish, you can't get information about shareholders. And this is the problem we will all be facing. That is why sources like human sources are becoming so important, because if you can't get data about the company, that probably means that a person in the tax office knows the data about the company. And if in the old days it was very easy, you just went to online and in a couple of clicks you got the annual report which you could read. Now it would probably take you, I don't know, a month to develop a source in a tax agency and get an annual report from there, which will of course be very difficult to I mean, it's a big challenge that we'll all face.
I guess I'll add a small additional answer to that question. I think the best friend of every journalist reporting on a country is another journalist from that country. I think this is why OCCRP is such a network, had success being a network, because we are all, we're not about ego or claiming credit. We're all about working together as a network. And I think none of us could have done so many of the things we've done without each other. And,
absolutely.
Without our Russian colleagues, our Ukrainian colleagues, even, our colleagues all over in the UK and Germany, everywhere. They've made our Russian stories possible. They've made our Ukrainian stories possible in many ways. So I think that in journalism, being a collaborative network is really the future. And that's what we are trying to promote here at OCCRP.
I absolutely agree.
So that we've come to the end of that time. I'm sorry if I didn't get to your question in the audience. We've had very many questions and only a little bit of time here. But I want to thank everybody, all of our accomplices here in the audience who have joined us today. Your contributions make our work possible. You help make Roman's work possible. You heard about some ways that you could help, so maybe have a think about that. And please keep our webinars in mind. We will be doing more of these webinars in the future on different topics. If you have any feedback on this one, if you have any ideas for future webinars we should do, or really any feedback about our work, you can reach out to Charlie Turner. He is our engagement editor at membership@occrp.org. And I think with that, we will end on time today. Roman, thank you so much for taking the time, and good luck with your work. And I'm looking forward to the next big story.
Thank you, guys. Bye.